Good morning, everybody. I'm waiting for everybody to be online. There we go. We are all online. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Periscope, and I'm on YouTube. So, we're going to get started today. And you know what? I did not put any kind of a title on this, which may have been not a mistake. I'll go back and put a title on everything when I'm done, because I'm not sure exactly where I'm going. But what we're doing is going to replay this time lapse of where I've gotten to. And I want to talk a little bit about this piece, presenting the March Hare and the Mad Hatter as if you were Alice sitting at the table with them, and you've gone down a rabbit hole. You've just gone through a bunch of really odd things. And you come upon really the first of the citizens of the Red Queen. And this is the first time that Alice really gets kind of an insight on what the society is like in Wonderland, and it's kind of a great way to kind of frame the things that are going on in the United States today. It seems like we are in kind of Wonderland. A lot of things don't make sense to me, and because they don't make sense to me, I spend time searching for things to make sense of the world. And sometimes you have to look into history to figure out how is it that we got here? How is it that we got here today with all the literal craziness that we've been doing? So after all of the stuff that we've done the last couple days, so here we've got the March Hare and the Mad Hatter. And let's delve into a little bit of history and start a thread. Just a single, this is one of the influences of what's happening today. And it might be something that is enlightening, because, let's see, I want a light blue. And put the light blue in there on the table here. It might be a little bit enlightening because everything seems topsy-turvy, and it's been topsy-turvy in a very short amount of time. I don't know, before the election in 2016, everything seemed kind of like, everything's okay. But in actuality, in history, if we follow a few of the threads, and I'm going to start off with one thread that I think is extremely important to consider, that leads to other current events that are going on today. So, as I draw, this is going to end up taking a lot longer time than I anticipated because of my talk, but I think it's important to talk about these things, because if we don't talk about these things, we just stay ignorant of how we got to today. And I think that's important. So let me just get right to the point. And what I want to talk about today is the Frankfurt School. And Frankfurt, it's not Frankfurt, is with an O, it's with a U. And they came over to the United States. They were a German philosophy group, and they were big on social theory. And they fled Germany before World War II because of what was going on there. And that sounds to me like it's reasonable to consider that maybe they were fleeing the state. They didn't like or they weren't liked much by Hitler and his group. So they fled. And they landed in Columbia University in New York. And what they were big on is critical theory. And so what their main criticisms were, was a critical theory is criticizing things. And they criticized large corporations as being predatory, technology's role in society, that wasn't good, industrialization wasn't good, and we got to remember this is just World War II era, and there seemed to be a decline in individualism that they were critical about, and capitalist society in general, which all that seems a little odd to me, especially when you consider the decline of the individual as being that's something that the United States is, that's what the whole Constitution is about, is protecting the individual from not just the government, but they have rights that they have as individuals and not as groups. And so they've, right off the bat, I get a little bit of weird, and so they ended up. One of their number one influences is Karl Marx. And that's socialist theory. The interesting thing about Karl Marx is all of his theories are fantastic, fantasy. It's fantastic. Wouldn't it be great theory? And he did mention that he didn't think that true socialism could come about without some kind of state intervention and some kind of state forced implementing it by force, because people don't just change their mindset overnight. But the Frankfurt School, what they added to what Marx was doing is they started using psychoanalysis, sociology, existential philosophy. And existential philosophy is it's about existence, existential. So the questioning or proving the existence of something, often like making the argument of whether or not God exists or doesn't exist, the existence of global warming. These are all, we hear this an awful lot right now about the climate change being an existential threat. What they mean is that it's a threat to our existence. And then they also used a lot of disciplines that just worked, that suited their, to push their own agenda. So let's talk about that a little bit. There's been large changes in psychoanalysis, and we can see a lot of those changes. There was psychology has changed over the years with various people, and so how they, and also they've done a lot of, the government's done lots of research on people and the psychology of what makes them tick. And social media that exists, so I'm putting some threads together here. Social media as it exists today Several of the founders and people who are integral in social media have talked about, they use psychology to get people to stay on their platforms. And, why wouldn't they? It's a tool that's available. And the more people that are using their platforms are beneficial to them. So they use psychology. And even in the last election, our president, there we go. Our president, through Cambridge Analytica, used our social, and he went alone. The other corporations, companies, and candidates also used use psychology from our social, what we freely gave to the net, what we freely exposed to the net. We were able to. I don't have all my lights on. There we go. Now you can see me. We get the stuff that we freely have given to the net. Naively, we did that. And I would argue that was somewhat of a existential threat that was underhanded by let's see, that's got too much making choices here. Let's just do this fleshy tone for the chair. Now, what I'm doing here is just putting some background so everything will be opaque when I paint over the top of it. I'm going to go ahead and fill that in too. And so Facebook and they've used social media as a way to get into the mindset of the populace. And when I was talking about Cambridge Analytica, one of the things that they did was they would look at the group of wherever it is they were wanting to campaign. They knew that if they could sway, due to the lack of people voting, it's ridiculous how small the populace, how few of the populace actually vote and help make these decisions. So I always recommend voting. And so they realized that if they could get 6,000 people who seemed to be on the fence on their social media, they could sway them. They could sway 6,000 people in a district, then they could win the district. And that is actually how Trump won each of those important districts. And so, using psychoanalysis, that's a tricky tool, and it's a manipulation tool for all sides of the argument. And then sociology, now that's a whole different story. Sociology, we put people in groups and generalize. And then so women, okay, and then we might break it down, and each in the group of women, we break it down into segments by age, by race, by education, and then we study some aspect of that. And then we scientifically say that these things are true generally about this group of people. And there's always exceptions to the rule. And then, of course, existential philosophy involves, our existence and what it means for us to exist, that we do exist, and what is a threat to our existence. So, and then some of the other Okay, so these people came and stayed and worked in Colombia, and they got into the university system. Their ideas are Marxist and idealistic in that manner. And so what happened, there's lots of things that happened in history that really made them have to change the game plan. And one of those things that happened was in the 60s, a man from the Soviet Union wrote a book called the Gulag Archipelago. And prior to that, the socialist, there was groups of people that were promoting the idea that, socialism, that this is a good thing. And we didn't realize what the extent of what was happening in these, Hitler was National Socialist, and then Russia, under Lenin and Stalin, tried to make Russia, or the Soviet Union at the time, socialist. And both of those regimes had to do it by force. And then, so in the 60s, and it actually got published, I think in the 80s, he wrote it in, it took him 10 years to write it. He had spent time in the Gulag, and he gathered all sorts of stuff. It's called the Gulag Archipelago. And I would highly recommend finding that. I looked for it on Audible, and the listing's there, but it's unavailable. I forgot to look for it this morning, but it wasn't that long ago that I looked for it. However, I did find it on YouTube as an Audible and under Best Audio Books. So if you want to know a little bit more about what really went on in Russia, that would be a good thing to, and it's going to take you some time. It's a seven-part series, and the first one is 11 hours. So he wrote this mammoth story based on fact of what it is like to live there, and it's horrible, and it's not for the faint of heart. And so, let's see, just a little bit more on this stuff. I'm gonna go ahead. Okay, the darker yellow. Anyway, I've got to get painting, or I'm not going to get anything done. So this, and then they found out that what was going on in that socialist country was not good. Millions of people incarcerated for absolutely like nothing. It just being, they would get incarcerated and locked up for questioning whether or not, in writing, whether or not Stalin's ideas were good or not. And what's happening today? People are getting shut down, getting suppressed on social platforms for questioning what one party is doing over the other, or having or supporting one party over the other. And this is alarming, and it's like going down the rabbit hole. And I'm going to move this guy down here below. There we go. We got some stuff happening. Look at that already. That's pretty cool. I'm liking that a lot. Okay, so I'll bring the highlights underneath the line work. Underneath. And I haven't quite decided what I was going to do with the background yet, so let's just keep on with the figures. So when this book came out, the communists, I mean, they've been here. They've always been here. They decided that maybe it's not such a good thing anymore to discuss things like we've been discussing them. And of course, in there we had the McCarthy era as well, communist scare, another boogeyman internationally. So they decided after the archipelago, we need to rethink about how we go about things. And that was the beginning of a shift. And also, all of these people in the 60s who were buying into all this stuff are coming of age to be in positions of power and control. And this is all from the influence of the Frankfurt School, that their plan was to infiltrate the religious, the religious places, the schools and government. And they've managed to do that over the last 80 years. So what they decided to do is they started to attack through existential philosophy, linguistics, structuralism, and hermeneutics, which is the study of what the Bible means. And they've also attacked analytic philosophy and diminished how we are approached in the world about certain ideas, and so they promote their ideas this way. And so a lot of the craziness that we're seeing right now is from this kind of philosophy and thinking. So once you start attacking all of these base ideas, and especially linguistics, I don't know if you all noticed, but I noticed they changed the meaning of words. And so what does that mean? That means you can't communicate like you used to. You can't use just everyday words anymore without being considered a hater for some reason. Just like this symbol here, that's not linguistic, but it certainly is in that communications area, that this is somehow now racist. And so they use words like racism, Nazism, white supremacist, and they use them with disregard to what they actually mean, and in the long run, lower the actual power within the word itself. No one takes that seriously anymore, which is sad because those are very important things to consider when we're communicating. And those are very nasty things in society. But they're defining it in such a way that, just like in Russia, the era of the Gulag Archipelago talks about, these people did nothing and they got arrested. And now you can get arrested in parts of the world because of quote-unquote hate speech. You can get arrested and jailed and fined. Now, you're not going to the gulag. No, not yet. But you can get arrested and your life upended. And, of course, you get into the newspaper. And, of course, you don't have to actually be actually wrong. And like the young boys from Tennessee with the MAGA hat. They were actually caught guilty and judged publicly because they had a red hat on that Make America Great Again. Is that where we're at now? Yes, that's where we're at now. Luckily, there's still some sanity, and those boys got some reparations for the media, from the media. CNN got their hands slapped. And apparently it wasn't enough because they just continue to do all of the horrid reporting that they've been doing all along. And it just seems nothing phases them. And that's because there is a bigger philosophy behind all of this. And it is about power. And that is what it's actually really all about. They're not concerned about you as a citizen. Just as long as they have power and you sit down and shut up. They've also seems to have a war on, the structure of things. Dare I say it? All of this Russia for the last 3 years. Now it's the impeachment. I've got friends who just, they are rabidly haters of Trump. Well, okay, great. You can have that. But is what is happening, the question I have is what's happening to him. Would you be satisfied if it was happening to somebody that you did like? Would you be okay with that? Because it's all about the individual. That's what the United States is about. Is the individual. Protecting the individual. If you wouldn't want it to happen to you or your friends, then you probably wouldn't want it to happen to the president either, no matter how much you dislike him. I mean, if they can do this, think about it for just a second. They can actually do this and pull this off and get him impeached over. And I watched the hearings. There was nothing there that I would want anybody convicted for. I mean, not even fined for. But yet, here we are. That's the big news today, that all the mainstream media is going to cover is the Senate getting the impeachment papers from the other side of the legislature. That's going to be the big story. What's not going to be the big story is the discovery of one of Bernie Sanders' supporters and somebody involved in his campaign, saying that anyone, if Bernie doesn't get the Democrat nomination, it'll start in Milwaukee with the DNC convention, and they will burn the place down, and what will follow is burning of other large cities. And if you want to know where that came from, it's Project Veritas. And I've kind of admire them. They uncover things. And when the media runs away from the story, I've gotten to the point where I'm like, maybe I need to pay attention to that, because that story is something they don't want us to see. Yep, and Project Veritas has been shadow banned, and you still find them, but you have to actually take the effort to go find them. The guy, I watched that video, the first and second video from Project Veritas, And it's damn scary to hear somebody talk like that. And it also brings up all of the stuff that I'm talking about with the Frankfurt School. What is it that their real plan is? The real plan is if you don't, they're looking for a revolution. They're looking to change everything and turn it on its head. And if you don't sign up and you don't agree with them, they want to lock you up or line you up and shoot you, just like they did in Cuba out on the beach. Now, we can make the argument that guy is pretty ignorant. Yeah, well, I'll agree with that. He's very ignorant because he had every historical reference that he had was off a lot. He was talking about how the gulags was something much better than what the CIA will lead you to believe. It was a good place. I don't know if you've seen the Bernie Sanders talking about how Russia is such a great place from the 80s before the Gulag Archipelago was published worldwide. And he hasn't seemed to change. I mean, these people are masters of psychology and linguistics and persuasion, changing things. This is how that happens. We are all being manipulated. And that's kind of an uncomfortable place to sit, to know that you've been being manipulated. Because we're being manipulated everywhere. Then on top of all of that, we have power and control. And I'm participating in that right now. I am over on all these social medias, and I know that probably most of the subject that I'm just talking to you about, they're gonna at least derank whatever it is that I have if somebody's looking for it. It's one of the reasons I didn't put a title on it. So I'm actually wondering whether or not me not putting a title on it, whether or not it'll even post when I'm finished. This is my experiment today. So the rabbit hole goes really, really deep. I've been following this now for all this kind of stuff for over 3 years. So I really wanted to understand what's happening. How is it that people can think this way? And it's because it just seems so unindividualistic. I mean, it's like they're fighting against individualism for power and control. That's the thing that worries me the most, is losing my rights and my freedoms. And I found the Gulag Archipelago, and he talks in there about getting arrested. That's the very first chapter. It's about getting arrested. And he talks about this phenomenon of when people got arrested, they just went willingly. They'd walk through the streets and they wouldn't call out. And they would just walk. And in his arrest, he actually had to lead the people arresting him, the officers arresting him, to the jail. But he said he had several opportunities to cry out and warn fellow citizens that, think all this was happening, and he didn't. In some recess of his mind, he knew that this was just inevitable. And he talks about other people's descriptions of their arrests, and some of them were just relieved because there were arrests happening everywhere. And some people were like, why haven't I been arrested? Why haven't I done something wrong? All these other people, they haven't done near as much as I did. Why haven't I been arrested? Psychological torture. And then they would use the psychology when they arrested people. You get woke up in the middle of the night. And so many of these arrest descriptions reminded me of the arrest descriptions of Manafort and Stone. That makes them suspicious to me. That makes those two arrests suspicious to me. I don't have any of the I don't have, all I have is the public information on those two arrests. And from the description of who Stone is, he kind of sounds like kind of a sleazebag. But I don't know if he was doing anything illegal. That's all kind of vague, exactly what was going on with him. He's definitely not a friend of the Democratic Party, from what I understand. At least not now. So what is it all about, really? I mean, we have to work through that, try to figure out what's really going on. And the only way we do that is pay attention and then understand history. And all I did was pull one thread today. I just pulled one influencer, which was the Frankfurt School from history. And a little bit of their stuff. I think that the ideas of socialism is grand ideas. They're grand. I don't think that human beings work that way. It's to each according to their need, from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. And so what happens is, if people aren't rewarded for the work they do, and their work results in someone who doesn't work, I don't know if you remember, AOC's website for a brief time said that they wanted to give a basic income even to those who aren't willing to work. Not just not able, but unwilling to work. Which is an insight on some thought patterns within that campaign or in that staff. Yeah, they didn't mean to publish that. Of course not. Just like the Bernie Sanders, I'm sure, didn't mean for one of his major staffers to talk about gulags for the Republicans, who he described as Nazis. Shoo! The rabbit hole. It's deep. It's deep and wide. Yeah, they don't want us to really know what's going on. Gotta pay attention. And the thing is, as an artist, I suppose they just look at the world a little differently than other people. But I'm quite alarmed. I'm really alarmed with the Bernie Sanders staffer. And they'll throw him under the bus. Oh, yeah. They'll throw him under the bus because he's talked out of school. He didn't know he was being recorded. But he was talking about that passionately. Yeah, this is the kind of look I had on my face, watching what he had to say. And he also talked about other staffers having that attitude. Alarming. And this is something that now the thing is, if it was something that was truly, and this all came to light before the CNN debate with Bernie and Warren and et al. They they participated in that. And the question to me was whether or not the CNN would bring up what Warren's, there was these leaks. And just thinking about this, leaks. Are you sick of leaks yet? All they are is just rumors. The whole Russian collusion thing was full of leaks. And the Trump impeachment is full of leaks. And rumor and innuendo. Is that what we really want to be judged on, is rumor and innuendo about ourselves? Doesn't look like anybody's chatting with me. I got one person on Facebook. I don't know if that's me or... Hi. But these are just things. Oh, and also, the CNN didn't. That news from the Project Veritas came through the day of the debate. But sure enough, they brought up. They're throwing Bernie under the bus now. See, they're throwing Bernie under the bus in favor of Warren. At least CNN is. That's how I read it. Because they apparently, maybe, Bernie is too establishment based. Maybe they have a longer term plan that Warren could fulfill by being in 8 years, where they're concerned about whether or not Bernie could make it 8 years. But the question is to whether or not a woman can be president. That was what was brought up, and supposedly had said that to Warren. And who knows what the context was? Maybe the context was, Hillary, not Warren herself. We don't know exactly when that was. I mean, it might have been in the reporting. I just shake my head. But CNN didn't have any problem stating the rumor that Bernie had said that as if it was fact. They had no problem doing that. See, that's part of the problem, is that facts aren't facts anymore. Okay, so let's go over to something else other than highlights. Let's go Simploo. Yeah, facts aren't facts anymore. So if you really want to run down that rabbit hole, I recommend doing some research on the Frankfurt School and looking into the Gulag Archipelago. And watch that Project Veritas, those couple of videos. I think they're going to have some more. Basically, what they did is they went into the Bernie campaign and just videotaped conversations with that they had personally with other people. This guy was passionate. I mean, it was jaw-dropping. And they'll throw him under the bus because he talked too much. But really raises some questions. Really raises some questions about what it is that they're really actually starting to plan. What is it they do want from us? They want us to shut up and sit down. That's what they want. That's really what they want. Because we, I guess, don't know what's good for us. And that's scary on many levels. And it's very not American mindset. That truth and justice for all, freedom of speech, amendments. And you know what? That does really make me feel like I really need to make sure that my Second Amendment is protected. Especially after that Veritas video. Especially after the Veritas video. Because it can't just be the Bernie Sanders group that's thinking this way. It can't be. And you know, that guy might just been talking out his butt. I mean, but it seemed like it seemed to me like there were several. This wasn't just a one evening, you know, guy drinking at the bar or talking. And I'm not saying he needs to be arrested either. I'm saying we need to be warned. We need to be warned. We need to be on alert. That guy has a right to say anything he wants to about things, but because of his association and being paid by the Sanders campaign, you know, I know they have probably thousands and thousands of people on their payroll. But he's been with them since 2018. And he was one of their biggest activists, or biggest, he had a big role. And he so freely talked about it. See, I don't want him to shut up. I don't want him to shut up. I want him to talk and talk and talk and talk and keep on talking. That's what I want from that guy. Because then we know what their mindset is. He let the cat out of the bag, possibly. Definitely more on alert now. I have been disappointed in this round of Democrats. They don't seem to be. They're just. It comes up that they're just anti-Trump and not pro their constituents, which seems really odd to me. Really odd. That strategy just seems like that is not what, that's also very telling. And you know, they may be surrounding themselves in a bubble that most of that's their constituents' number one concern. But I have a feeling that they also have concerns about other things, you know, deal with taxes and other things that most elections are about. But this one certainly just seems to be deposing, getting rid of Donald Trump. And here's a little last couple words for food for thought. How powerful have they made Donald Trump? Think about that for a minute. It almost seems to me like they have been working hard to make sure that he gets reelected. And for what cost? It's either that or they're just completely incompetent, because there isn't a single one of them on that debate field that looked like, leader of the free world material. And seriously, I've been really not happy with the Democratic Party.
Sorry, I couldn't quite hear you.
Oh, Siri. Because I said seriously? Siri thought I was talking to her. So they're listening. Right there. It's technology. Listening. Always listening. Such a dissident. I'm not fearful that I'm going to be lined up and summarily shot quite yet. Or arrested. And I know that I'm opening myself up to lots and lots of people being mad at me. And the way I feel about that is, yeah, you go ahead. You got the same rights as I do to speak your mind. You can be mad at me all you want. But I'm seeing some serious concerns with the situation right now that we're in. And it's not, quite emergency, but definitely we want to, and I don't think it's quite existential quite yet. I don't think that the existence of our republic is completely threatened yet, but it is certainly something that we need to be vigilant about. And I know there's going to be people who disagree with me on that. We don't need to make everything a 4-alarm emergency. That's just exhausting. I don't know if anybody else is just exhausted by the 4-alarm emergency. And, there are so many things that have happened over the last year. Oh, I mean, what was the headline on the 16th, or right around the middle of last month? Was it the whole impeachment thing? What was the headlines? What were the top 4 things last month that everybody was freaked out about? It's like they want to keep us on this cycle of fear, and it's just driving me nuts. So, for anybody watching later, thank you for making it this far. I appreciate it. And I'm going to have to stop for a little while and come back tomorrow, and we can talk about maybe another thread, or maybe we can talk a little bit more about the Gulag Archipelago and how it has relevance today. I really like to continue reading that book and get to that later. But you know what? The news media is going to do me good, and they're going to come up with something completely outrageous between now and then. Now and tomorrow morning, in the next 24 hours. It'll be impeachment. It may be something completely different to keep us from focusing on the impeachment. For crying out loud. There we are. Here we are again at the end of my hour. And I'm having a hard time stopping because I just really enjoying this piece. There we go. So that's where we're stopping today. We're coming quite along. At some point, I'm going to have to make a decision on that background. Well, I think that's a good start and good finish for today. So, and you have a great day, and don't get all wound up and emotional about things. That's what they're wanting you to do. And don't feel powerless, because we can vote, and we can write our congressman. We can talk to each other, and we can even form groups and make sure that our republic stays intact. I mean, because they're talking about changing the voting so that there's no electoral college, and that's bad. As long as, it's really bad for us in Kansas, because we just won't have any voice at all. And I go and change subjects there at the end. But there's so many things happening. There's so many scares that they're trying to do. We just need to take a breath and then watch what's going on. Try to remember the things that are going on. Because at some point, I would actually like to see somebody put together the major headlines in the last year. Because I think maybe a lot of us would be blown away. Oh, I forgot that. That was a big thing. I mean, did you forget about the Covington kids with the MAGA hats before it came up again that they won their lawsuit? I'm hoping that lawsuit puts a pause on media. I really wish they would have sued them out of business, but because that was just the most horrible thing to do to a child. No, there is more horrible things. But to dox him and to dox a young man, it was just terrible. Nationally, internationally. Well, and here we go. And don't want to change the subject. Don't want to go forward. And we'll see you tomorrow.